Hi everybody, and thanks for tuning in. We're back at the workbench. Today, we're working on the E-MU Systems EMAX. We're going to be addressing one of the problems that these things suffer from, a worn out power supply. So to start out, I'm going to flip it over, and we're going to begin by removing the 10 screws around the perimeter. Something that I would like to point out before I open up this machine is that I'm working on a grounded workbench. I'm wearing neoprene gloves and I have a ground strap on my ankle. This is a precaution that you should take before you open up vintage electronic music instruments. These devices are very susceptible to electrostatic discharge, so I just like to mention that before going into a machine like this. So after we get the screws out, before we open this up, we need to make sure that we have a scribe handy. You'll notice that this scribe has a, not quite a 90-degree angle on the end of it. And it's got a nice sharp point. What we're going to be doing is using this to very gently pry off the IDC ribbon cable socket that connects the motherboard of the EMAX to the analog board. Keep in mind, the front of the machine is here, and I have the machine upside down. We're just going to peer in here. We don't want to pry this up more than about 45 degrees. Taking our scribe, we're just going to go in and get the tip of that scribe right where the socket meets the pin header. And we're just going to leverage the scribe tool against the PCB. Put a little teeny bit of pressure, move to the middle, move to the other end. We just slowly work our way. Want to go really slow. These IDC sockets are designed to fit on the pin header very tight. And that's good because we don't want them falling off while our EMAX is buttoned up when it gets moved around or whatever. You can see I'm just very, very, very carefully prying that. Once you've got it to that point, you just pop it right off. That's the correct way to unseat one of these 2.54 millimeter IDC sockets from the header without damaging it. Don't want to pull on the cable. You don't want to stress this at all, especially in the case of the EMAX, because on the other end of this cable, we have a header that is soldered to the PCB, the motherboard. So these are very difficult to replace unless you have experience doing it. And even for experienced technicians, engineers like we have here at SCSI.repair, it's a difficult job. Now that we've got this out of the way, we're going to address this cable. Most EMAX are not going to have this. This is an aftermarket modification that was added by E-MU. And there are a few units that were sold by E-MU Systems from the factory that have this DB25 on the rear, but something that you do not run into very common. But if you do have one of these, it's the same exact process with the scribe. It's literally just getting in there, using leverage to carefully pry it off of the header so that you do not damage the socket. Also, this prevents you from bending the pins, which will make reseating the socket very difficult. All right, awesome. So now that we've got this disconnected, we can take the bottom of our EMAX, which has our analog board. This is very dusty, and so we will probably take this off and put it in our parts cleaner. We have an ultrasonic parts cleaner for PCB boards. This will get submerged in that cleaner, and it will get rid of all of this grime and dust and maybe cigarette smoke residue. Who knows? We'll make another video about that sometime down the road. Anyhow, once you get this free, you can set it aside. So like I was saying, you can see that this IDC ribbon cable that connects to the motherboard from the analog board has a connector, a crimp connector, which is soldered. So this is permanently affixed to this motherboard. You know, if you pull on this and this comes free, well, you're going to end up calling me. Okay, so next thing to do is to free up our power supply. Power supply installation in the EMAX is a little bit different than in the E3X. There's a little bit more going on. One of the main things is that there's this voltage switch on the back. This is a old school linear power supply, and it has a 240 110 voltage selection switch, which will not be required with our new power supply. So these wires can simply just be clipped right off. And we'll put a sticker on the back of here that says not in use, just to inform anybody. You'll notice that the wiring goes from this is an AC line filter. The AC voltage comes in here, goes through this line filter, and it's going through these self-stick twist tie. They're captive twist ties, basically. We don't need to cut those, but I'm just going to pull this wire out through. Easier said than done. Now there is another one of these captive zip tie deals here. Looks like somebody has already cut that in the past, or maybe it broke. So we don't need to get that one. Now we're going to unplug the AC connector. It's the blue, light blue, and brown wires. That will just plug out. A little bit of wiggling back and forth and it comes right out. You can remove the supply loom that goes to the motherboard. And the last connection that's going to come off is a spade connector. It's a green wire. And this spade connector is the chassis ground. It's a little bit difficult to get those off sometimes. Just a back and forth wiggle will make it come right off. So now we're going to take our Phillips screwdriver. There are two Phillips screws, just like on the E3X. We're going to take these out. Oh, look at that. This one was rusted and it broke right off. That's unfortunate. We will have to fix that. This one feels like it might break too. Okay. I'm gonna go get some of my magic croil. This stuff is amazing. probably one of the best penetrating oils that exists. I've never found anything that tops it. A little teeny bit of this goes a really long way. Had I realized that this was so rusted, I would have applied this to both of the Phillips screws. Takes just a little teeny tiny squirt. A little bit of this goes a long ways. We'll let that sit for about 10 minutes to do its magic, and then we'll come back and we'll get that last rusty screw out. Well, unfortunately, the Croil penetrating oil did not do the trick. There are two nylon standoffs that hold the bottom of the power supply in place. You just very carefully pull out on both sides, and it will just pop right off. So in order to mount this power supply to the chassis of this particular EMAX, there are these metal standoffs that are spot welded to the chassis, and they have a machine screw that goes into them. You can see some of them down here where the hard drive plate would mount. So there are two of those that protrude from the side of this, and like I said, they're just spot welded in, so they're easy enough to drill out, leaving two holes here on the side. So what I'm going to use instead are some brass standoffs and some screws with a locking washer. The screw is going to go in from the outside of the enclosure, and then the standoff will mount on the inside of the enclosure. That will allow us to remount the power supply in the same fashion that it was mounted with the stock screws. Aside from those screws that were in there being rusted, it did appear like at some point someone had removed the power supply, maybe to recap it or to try and address issues that were leading to its failure. And when they put it back in, it looks as though they had cross-threaded the screws. So unfortunate that was. Do have a solution that will get us back in business. Okay, so now that those are in there, I'm going to use some stainless screws to attach the power supply inside the EMAX. So this, same way that it goes out, it goes back in. The nylon standoffs that are down here just go into the two bottom holes, and that just pushes in. And then we'll take our stainless screw. We'll put that into the standoff that we just installed. That's going to hold the power supply nice and firmly in its stock location. Just like so. Okay, so now really all that's left is to reconnect the wires which we disconnected. Brown and light blue wire is bringing the line voltage in through the switch to the power supply. This one's got a stock zip tie right here. I'm just going to carefully remove that. It's going to give us a little bit more slack. We got tons of slack. So that goes right back here. There is a little tooth on the plug. you want to make sure that that tooth binds with the keeper. Like that. And then we have our chassis wire. This is a chassis ground wire. This goes to a male spade, which is protruding right here, or something like that. And then you have your power supply for the main board. On the EMAX, it's slightly different than it is on the E3X. You'll notice that there are only 2 sets of 4 wires on this particular power supply. There should be, I have one handy here. This machine came to us missing it, but there should be a second connector, which will only have 3 wires, plus 12 DC, plus 5 DC in the common. And this would go to this Molex connector, which would power your hard drive. This machine is going to get retrofit with our wireless SCSI drive emulator. It's a really cool upgrade to add to a vintage sampler like this because it allows you to have a web interface so you can easily change the SCSI configuration, put new drives on new IDs, etc. Also, if you have multiple samplers that are in the same lineage or that they have compatibility, you can very easily, with the web interface, move samples or drive images from one sample to the other one conveniently over your home wireless network. I'm going to cover that in an upcoming video, so stay tuned for that one. But anyways, we don't need that secondary wiring harness, that loom, because this is the stock floppy disk drive. It's going to get removed, and in its place is going to get installed our wireless SCSI emulator. And the wireless SCSI emulator uses the same, this is called a Berg connector. The Berg style connector is what provides power to the floppy drive, and our emulator device also uses a Berg, so it'll just stay in place. I'm going to leave this floppy drive powered for now because we're still going to be utilizing it. Anyways, back to the power supply install. The last thing that remains is to plug this in, and you'll find that the header, oops, I just lost one of my lights. What's going on here? I can see clearly now, the light is on. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know, I got these LED lights off of Amazon. They're pretty cool, but the LiPo battery that they come with is garbage. I'm gonna have to open them up and do a little bit of open light surgery. Probably put a new LiPo battery in so they have longer lifespan. I mean, I feel like I should get more than 30 minutes of life out of a battery-operated camera light. Anyways,
I digress.
These are keyed, so there's really only one way that you can put it onto this header on the power supply. So you don't have to worry about potentially connecting it the wrong way, etc. So you find the way that it fits on there and push it on, and that's it. That's all that goes into swapping out the power supply on the EMAX.